to the channel where today we are going to be previewing the Houston Texans for the 2026-2027 season. Without further ado, let's get into this Texans preview. Starting off with this Texans coaching staff, they bring back the main guys as they did last year. D'Amico Ryans entering his, I believe, fourth year as the Texans head coach. Nick Caley, their OC, entering the second year as the OC, and Matt Burke entering his fourth season as the Texans defensive coordinator. We'll start off with head coach D'Amico Ryans, which has just been an amazing hire for the first 3 years he's been there. 32-19 record. They made the playoffs every year. They won the division, I believe, 2 out of the 3 seasons. 10 plus wins every year, 12 last season. Last season, he was an amazing defensive coordinator in San Francisco, and he was only there for 2 years, coaching an elite defense in both seasons. Carried that over to Houston, coaching and helping assemble one of the better defenses in the league, and honestly, one of the better defenses I've seen in a while in the entire NFL. There's the whole thing that he does coaching where just no blitzing, no extra rushers, just four rushers, and you just have to deal with the four best, the one of the best D lines in all of football, the best edge rush duo, and try and pass on one of the best secondaries in the league. And he just does a great job. There's not really too much to be said about how good of a coach D'Amico Ryans is. And his DC, Matt Burke, who obviously doesn't have the biggest role being the DC behind the main defensive play caller in D'Amico Ryans. He was the Dolphins defensive coordinator in 2017 and 2018. He's worked under the Eagles, the Jets, and the Cardinals after his Dolphins tenure before going to Houston. Worked under some big names like D'Amico Ryans, like a Robert Sala, a Jeff Fisher, a Marvin Lewis, and has almost 30 years of coaching experience. So when you have a younger-ish, inexperienced-ish head coach like a D'Amico Ryans, I always think it's good if you're going to hire another guy in the same, or when you hire another guy on the same side of the ball as him, even if they're not going to be the play caller, to get a guy with a lot of experience. And that's what Matt Burke is. And I think he's been very beneficial to having for D'Amico Ryans to have a veteran voice who's been around a lot of teams, who's been under a lot of big names to be that sort of assistant to D'Amico Ryans. And then on the offensive side of the thing, you have Nick Caley. His second year, they had I'm trying to remember the name, but he's now the OC in Miami, I believe. Bobby Slokes, that's the name. He had his great season as the OC with Stroud his rookie year, and then it just didn't work well his second year. And then he leaves. They bring in Nick Caley last year, and now again entering his second year as the Texans OC. He was the Rams pass game coordinator for I don't know how many years, and the tight end coach. He was the Rams pass game coordinator and the tight end coach in 24, and he was the Rams tight end coach in 2023, not the OC. He's been the Patriots tight end coach before. And overall, the offense was about league average last year, but they did have bad O-line play. They had a lot of injuries to their receivers. CJ Stroud wasn't playing his best football. And he's also been under Sean McVay before, so he's been under one of the better offensive minds of all time. Nick Caley has. And the Texans offense, despite that, still was good. They were still good the year before, or they were good earlier in the season. And yes, they had that playoff game against New England. It wasn't great. They were still good against the Steelers in the playoffs as well. So I still think Nick Caley can be a good offensive coordinator for this team. And I also think continuity will help as well. I know they had continuity with Slowick, and that's when he fell off. But maybe the continuity can help Nick Caley and this Texans offense. Some better O-line play, which we'll talk about when we talk about the offense. Hopefully better CJ Stroud play consistently. I mean, he did well with this offense when Davis Mills was at quarterback. Davis Mills honestly played better than CJ Stroud at times last season. So that's also credit to Nick Caley as well. So I think it's a good staff. You have your very, very good head coach in D'Amico Ryans. You have his very experienced sort of assistant at DC in Matt Burke. And you have a good enough OC and Nick Caley, who I think can continue to be a better OC. So overall, it's a very good coaching staff here in Houston. Now going on to the offseason changes that this Texans team made on offense. We'll start off with the running back position. They move on from Nick Chubb, who eventually retired later this offseason, and they bring in David Montgomery from the Lions. I think this is a clear upgrade. Nick Chubb was honestly not terrible with Houston. He slowly came back from that terrible ACL injury, but you can clearly see that he's not the same player, hence why he ended up retiring. So they bring in David Montgomery as his replacement. I really like the David Montgomery trade. Right, he's been one of the best, if not the best, RB2s behind Jameer Gibbs. He now gets to go back to being a true starting running back. And I think he can excel in that role. in this Houston offense. You still have some good depth behind him, so he doesn't have to be the true number one running back, but instead of being 40-60 to Gibbs or maybe even 35-65 to Gibbs, he can now be like 70-30 or 65-35 to the rest of this Texans running back room. And again, with how Nick Chubb sort of finished his career, I think this is a clear upgrade at the running back position. At receiver, they move on from Christian Kirk and they bring in Lewis Bond in, I believe, the sixth round out of Boston College. And they traded for Kayshon Boutte very late into the offseason, like a week ago, as I'm recording this video. Christian Kirk wasn't a bad, like, fourth best receiver on the team. He had a great playoff game against Pittsburgh, but outside of that, he's just like okay depth at best. Lewis Bond, intrigue a little bit in the sixth round, but Kayshon Boutte, I think, is the big addition here at the receiver room. He had a really good game against the Texans. I don't think it was in the playoffs. I think it was the regular season. So that maybe was like, oh, got to trade for him. He beat us pretty bad. Let's trade for him. And I really like the upside of Kayshon Boutte. He just didn't really have a lot of room in that crowded Patriots receiver room. So the Texans take a chance on him. I didn't put this as a major upgrade at the receiver room because I think Boutte and Kirk are pretty similar. And then Lewis Bond is a six round pick. You never know what you're going to get out of a six round pick. So I think it's a pretty neutral change at receiver. The biggest change, honestly, is the loss of Jaden Higgins, but then you also have the potential addition of Tank Dell. But since those are two question marks, I guess, right now, I left it pretty neutral at the receiver room. Then at tight end, they add Foster Moreau and Marlon Klein out of the second round. These are both backups to their starting tight end, Dalton Schultz. Left it in neutral because Foster Moreau is just a depth guy. Marlon Klein has some intrigue as a second round pick out of Michigan, but I think it's pretty neutral, especially considering Dalton Schultz is going to be the main guy anyway. Then at O line, they move on from Titus Howard. Titus Howard was a very solid pass blocker, not a great run blocker, but overall not a bad tackle by any means. But they bring in Keelan Rutledge in the first round, who I like out of Georgia Tech. They bring in Wyatt Teller and they bring in Braden Smith, two very quality veterans. And their O line was really bad last year, and they added three potentially very quality players to this team. So I think they got a massive upgrade at the O line. So overall, I really liked what the Texans did this offseason on offense. Nick Chubb ends up retiring anyway. Christian Kirk, good depth player, but they got another good depth player just with upside in Kayshon Boutte. And then Titus Howard is a very replaceable but fine quality tackle. And those are the only notable changes or notable losses that they had. And they bring in plenty of good players. So I think it was a great offseason for this Texans offense. Now, talking about this Texans offense, we'll start off at the quarterback position with a very interesting quarterback to discuss, and that's CJ Stroud. Right? CJ Stroud has this incredible rookie season, and then he just wasn't as good year two, wasn't as good year three, had the really bad playoff game against New England, although I feel like people tend to forget that he actually had a pretty solid playoff game against Pittsburgh the week before, another good defense. But I also think since his rookie year, the offensive structure has gotten worse. The line wasn't good his year two. Bobby Slowick was not even remotely as good of a play caller as he was Stroud's rookie season. He still has been good in the regular season. They still have won double digit games every season. They still have made the playoffs every season. I'm pretty sure they won a playoff game. They won their wild card game every season. Now, last year, that was a lot of the defense that is the reason the Texans won 12 games. And also, as I mentioned earlier, Davis Mills at some point outperformed CJ Stroud. So, yeah, they won 12 games and won the wild card against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It wasn't the best CJ Stroud season, and he wasn't the number one reason why that happened. But I still think CJ Stroud's a really good quarterback. He's normally been really good in the playoffs, especially in the wild card playoff game. I think he'll look more like his rookie self this season with a better offensive line, with a hopefully healthy Tank Dell. I know they lost Jaden Higgins, but they do get Kayshon Boutte. Nico Collins, I think, was banged up a little bit last season, so you'll get full healthy Nico Collins. They have a run game with David Montgomery. I'm excited for this year. What is it, year four of CJ Stroud's big year, right? Contract year. There's all the discourse about the CJ Stroud contract extension, what he wants, what Houston wants to pay him. I still think Stroud's a good quarterback. I think you can't yeah, at some point you have to look at that rookie season was so long ago. We can't consistently rely on that being like, oh, look at what CJ Stroud did his rookie season. He can just do that again. He's just not playing as well. The further and further you get away from it, the less and less reliable it gets. But I still think we're 3 years removed from him being really good his rookie season. He still has been good in spurts in the other two seasons. It's not like he's been just complete completely terrible the other two seasons. Like he's still been a good quarterback. Maybe not the top 10, borderline top 10 quarterback like we were starting to give him after that rookie season. He's in more of that 15 to 20 range, right? Just based on what we've seen the last two seasons, especially the playoff game. But I still think CJ Stroud's really good, still super accurate in my opinion, still a great thrower of the football. And I'm hoping for a CJ Stroud bounce back because he has shown to be a really good quarterback. And hopefully we can get more of that instead of just a good quarterback here and there. So I'm rooting for Stroud, and I think he will have a good season. Now we can go to the running back room. We'll talk about their big addition of David Montgomery. As we mentioned, he's never really been the true number one running back for a while now, playing behind Jameer Gibbs in that split backfield that slowly became more of Gibbs' running back room as time went on. Montgomery sort of, it was initially like Montgomery and Gibbs, but then it was just Montgomery coming in for when Montgomery needed to come in for, like the situations that he fit best in. Still had 708 or 700 yards, 8 touchdowns last year. Obviously, super physical runner. Now, I like the addition because while Woody Marks is developing, who we'll talk about in a little bit here, Montgomery can allow Marks to have sort of that development time and be the number one running back behind Marks. Montgomery still had some really good games last year with the Lions, despite being the backup. He had that 150-yard and 2 touchdown game against the Ravens on prime time. Still averaged 4.5 yards a carry. And yeah, he's on the older side, no doubt, but I still think David Montgomery is a good running back. And I think now that he gets to be the team's true number one running back, I think he will have a very good season here in Houston behind that improved offensive line. And we'll talk about Woody Marks now. In year one, as a starter, he was the number one running back. He played 50% of the running back snaps. Wasn't perfect by any means as a rookie, but he still had 700 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 203 in the air, which that was his thing coming into the league, was that he's a very good receiving back. And you definitely saw that as a rookie. Yes, only averaged like 3.5 yards a carry. He did have 40 yards on the opening drive of the preseason, 40 total yards. I know it's the preseason, but he looked good on that drive against, I believe it was the Raiders. He could be a nice complement to Montgomery as that receiving threat. He had 100 yards and 12. He had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Steelers in that playoff game. Now we can talk about these Texans receivers, and we'll start off with the number one guy, Nico Collins. As I mentioned in the CJ Stroud talk, he was a little bit banged up last, or no, it was the Nick Caley talk. I think Nico Collins was a little banged up last year. He's missed 7 games over the last two seasons, but he still has been 1,000-yard receiver the last 3 years. He averages about 7 touchdowns a year over the last three. And we know how good Nico Collins can be when him and Stroud are sort of on together. Like when that connection between those two is really clicking, we know how good Nico Collins can be. He's that big frame, deep threat, rarely ever drops the ball like at all, like super sure hands, only 27 years old as well, so he still can get a little bit better. I really like Nico Collins. When he is healthy, this offense is just so much better. You saw towards the end of the season when he was banged up, it was really just rookies. Like Stroud had only Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins to throw the ball to, and Christian Kirk. And you really saw the impact that the absence of Nico Collins made. So getting him back, hopefully for a full healthy season, will completely help this offense potentially get back to what it was just 2, 3 years ago consistently. Then you have Xavier Hutchinson, who right now is potentially one of their other starting outside receivers. He's gotten more and more involved in the offense every year. Year three was really not much different. He had 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, got double the amount of targets from year two to year three, had only one drop, and maybe doesn't have the ceiling of their other young guys on this team, like a Higgins, a Noel, or even a Tank Dell, but he did have a good game against the Chargers. Under just 20 carries, he had 120 yards and or 120 scrimmage yards and 2 scrimmage touchdowns in a game against the Titans. So he's been able to put up good numbers as well, just in individual games. So he definitely has that ability to be a potential true number one running back later down the line. But I do like the David Montgomery pickup to sort of buy him that time and complement the two very nicely. So instead of Montgomery, being the complement to Gibbs, he now gets to be the true running back, and Marks can be the complement to Montgomery, which I think fits him better because I don't think he was necessarily ready to be the true running back yet. And you also have Jawar Jordan, who he's not going to get a ton of reps being the third running back, especially considering what they invested in David Montgomery. But I didn't mind Jawar Jordan. It seemed like a late season fantasy football sleeper after he had that 100-yard game against the Cardinals, I believe, in like week 15. Did average over 4.5 per carry overall in the minimal amount of snaps he got. He can break tackles. Not really a receiving threat, but he's also not a bad third running back at all going into just year two. So I really like Jawar Jordan there as that third running back. Now, Montgomery is on the older side, so maybe once Montgomery leaves, it can be a Marks Jawar Jordan backfield. But I definitely don't hate Jawar Jordan as your RB3 at all. Or not the Chargers. He had one good game, I think, last year, but I think he's very solid depth, and I think he can be this. He is this team's like receiver five going in the future, right? Because Tank Dell might not fully be healthy this year. We obviously know Jaden Higgins is out, so right now Xavier Hutchinson might be this team's like fourth best receiver on most games, but he's like the fifth or sixth going down the line, which I think is great for a guy like Xavier Hutchinson. And then we'll also talk about Jalen Noel, their other young guy that's actually going to get to play this season that we for sure know is going to play this season. Wasn't a bad rookie year as the team's like fifth most targeted or most counted receiver. Is that's the wording? Had just under 300 yards, two drops, also or two touchdowns, also only one drop. Had some good games. Had a good game against Seattle, which is always impressive, right? Anytime you have a good game against that Seahawks defense, I think it's pretty impressive. Still, obviously, had a lot of potential. Now he gets a bigger role without Isaiah Higgins, with maybe not full season of Tank Dell or full version of Tank Dell. So I think Noel could potentially step into that role. He's also a nice return man, which I think provides a lot of value compared to maybe what he provides as a receiver at this point in his career. But I do think he can develop into a better receiver. Then we'll go to Kayshawn Booty, kind of going all over the place because there's a lot to really talk about with this Texans receiver room. We'll go to Kayshawn Booty next. Their big splash trade of the offseason. I think they traded safety Jalen Reed and a seventh for Keyshawn Booty. He had that great game against them, as I mentioned. It was in the playoffs. It was in the playoffs. I didn't know if it was in the playoffs or not, but it was in the playoffs. Had that great touchdown against Houston in the playoffs. Never the biggest role in New England because it was a crowded receiver room. It got even more crowded with the trade for AJ Brown, so the Patriots were kind of shopping him around. Houston had the injury to Jaden Higgins, and they're like, let's get Kayshawn Booty. He had 550 and six touchdowns last year on under 40 targets in 14 games. So if he was fully healthy, he maybe could have had 700 or something yards. He had the highest passer rating in the entire NFL amongst receivers when targeted, had the fourth most yards per reception, had the third most average depth at target. So a nice big play, deep threat for Stroud. And he's only 24 years old. So it feels like the Texans traded for him because they just needed receiver help because of the Tank Dell question mark and because of the Jaden Higgins injury. But Booty can establish a nice long term future role on this Texans team because he still has a lot of potential. And then we'll talk about Tank Dell. We don't know if Tank Dell is going to play. We don't know when he's going to play. We don't know what version of Tank Dell we're going to get because that knee injury he had, I believe it was against the Chiefs, was horrible. He missed all of 2025 because of it, and I think his absence showed at times last year as well. And we're still unsure, as I mentioned, when he'll come back, how he will look. Hopefully he comes back soon, and hopefully he looks close to the Tank Dell that he was before he's injured. Before he was injured, because when he's healthy, he provides a element to this Texans offense that I don't think you really have anywhere else on this team. With that speed, with that explosiveness, with that play, the after the catch type of ability that he can have in 2024, before he got hurt, the 14 games he played before his injury, he had almost 700 yards, three touchdowns. He had 707 the year before. Does have occasional drop issues, but I think overall he can be a threat once the ball's in his hands. He can be that explosive deep play. I'm pretty sure the play he got injured was a deep ball touchdown against the Chiefs. I think it might have been on Christmas too. I'm not sure. or maybe they were about to play on Christmas, so they had those Christmas like jersey patches or something like that. But it was on a deep play, and he caught the ball. It was a very impressive touchdown. His leg happened to just snap. So I'm hoping that we can see Tank Dell on the field at some point this year and look like the version that he is. Maybe the Kayshawn Booty trade wasn't the best sign. I feel like it's like, oh, they lost Jaden Higgins, so that's why they traded for Kayshawn Booty. But maybe also the Tank Dell recovery also played a factor in that. But I'm again, even if the signs are negative, I'm hoping for the best out of Tank Dell because I really like Tank Dell. And as I mentioned, he provides this team something on this offense that you don't really find anywhere else on this team. And the last big guy to talk about that we are going to see on the field this year is Lewis Bond, their sixth round pick out of, I believe it is Boston College. Not the most explosive athlete, really good route runner, great hands, great ball skills, great feet, nice big possession receiver who can make it. He has a very high floor, I think, but a low ceiling because he doesn't have that explosiveness that, a guy like Tank Dell has when he's on the field. But I didn't mind the Lewis Bond pick, especially considering the Tank Dell question marks, because he can be that slot for you that you might not want Nico or Hutchinson or Noel or Booty to play. He can be that slot for you. So I like the Lewis Bond pick in the sixth round. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think people really overshoot the super athletic guys who don't really have all the other NFL skills necessarily fully developed. But they're like, if he can develop good route running and good hands combined with all that athleticism, he can be really good. And then he never develops all those, and he's just a guy who's super athletic. Well, with Lewis Bond, he understands the position. He can run routes, he can get open, and he can catch the ball, which sometimes that matters, and that's all you really need, even if he doesn't necessarily have the explosiveness or the speed to really dominate NFL corners. Maybe even just that understanding of the position and those natural skills can find him some usefulness and some impact in the NFL. Then we'll also talk about Sterling Shepard, I guess. They bring him in from Tampa. I mean, they picked him up as well. He had 400 yards, a touchdown with the Bucks last year. He's a nice veteran in a very young receiver room, so I didn't mind the pickup. Reliable hands, decent to solid depth overall. And if, as I keep going back to Tank Dell, but if Tank Dell is uncertain in when he's going to play, and you don't want to start Lewis Bond as a rookie, sixth round rookie in the slot right away, you can maybe throw Sterling Shepard out there as a more reliable veteran presence at that slot position. They also picked up Justin Watson, or not picked up, they've had him. They picked him up from the Chiefs, I think, last year. Another depth veteran piece with playoff experience. And then also there's Jaden Higgins. So we haven't really talked about him as a player. We just talked about how he's injured and how that resulted in them potentially trading for Kayshawn Booty, very likely trading for Kayshawn Booty. But I like Jaden Higgins. And I liked what I saw from him last year. Had a very promising rookie season, had 500 yards, six touchdowns, also only had one drop, like it seems most of this Texans receiver core did. He had a very good game against the Chargers. And it just sucks that he's out all year, but he's definitely a valuable piece going forward. I really like the potential of Jaden Higgins moving forward. It's just unfortunate that we won't be able to see him this year. But luckily, they have a lot of quality players. They have their guy in Nico Collins. They might not have a lot outside of him in terms of solidified, super reliable, really good players at receiver, but they have a lot of depth to make up for the Jaden Higgins injury. It's just can they get more out of a Jalen Noel, more out of a Kayshawn Booty? Can they get anything out of Tank Dell, more out of Hutchinson? We'll see what they can get out of a Lewis Bond. So it does suck that Jaden Higgins is out all season, but I do really like him going forward for this Texans team. And then finally, in terms of pass catchers, we'll talk about the tight end room. You have Dalton Schultz, who's just a good quality starting tight end. Not much needs to be said about Dalton Schultz that really hasn't been said already. He had 800 yards, three touchdowns last year. He has familiar with CJ Stroud as this will be his fourth year with the team, which is the same amount of seasons Stroud's been there. He's got good hands, a very nice safety blanket, can still be your team's leading receiver in a specific game if he really needs to. And there's again not much needs to be said about Dalton Schultz that has not already been said. He's just a good, solid football player. And then outside of him, there's a lot of interesting pieces at this tight end in this tight end room. You honestly have four players that can all get somewhat talked about here. We'll start off with their free agent pickup of Foster Moreau. Right now on the R lads depth chart, he's the second tight end on the team. Didn't really have much of a role or really any impact on the Saints last year, but he had 400 yards and 5 touchdowns just the year before and can be a very solid tight end two, three, four, five, whatever he's going to be on this Texans team. Then you have Marlon Klein, their second round pick out of Michigan, German born player. Not the most athletic and does have a lot of, or does lack a lot of experience considering he's recently just started playing football as he, grew up in Germany. He can be a good blocker. He can be a nice backup wide tight ends, got good size, speed. Again, he's not unathletic. He's just about an average athlete. He can move well overall. I didn't mind the pick second round. I think it's more of a testament to maybe their lack of belief in their other two younger tight ends, Cade Stover and Brevin Jordan. Cade Stover, he was Stroud's college teammate. It was a nice little story to reunite Stroud with Cade Stover. It just hasn't really worked out though as a former fifth round pick. And that's, part of the reason why it might not have worked out is because they signed Foster Moreau, because they drafted Marlon Klein. And it's also not maybe good for Brevin Jordan, who is still only 26, but he only played 2 games in 2024. He missed all of 2025, was a very promising player early on in his career, and injuries just really haven't allowed him to continue to develop. And they've invested in that tight end position since that with Moreau, with Klein, even with a Dalton Schultz, even with a Cade Stover who got drafted after Brevin Jordan started to get hurt. So I still think there's hope there for a guy like Brevin Jordan, maybe even a guy like Cade Stover. But it seems like this tight end room is mainly going to be Schultz, Moreau, and Marlon Klein, which aren't bad backups behind Schultz with Moreau and Klein. But it's really mainly Schultz's tight end room because he's just a good football player, and I like Schultz. He's not a world beater at tight end, but he's just a good, consistent, quality football player. Now we'll talk about this Texans offensive line, which, as you saw in the offseason changes, had a major overhaul and a major improvement to this offensive line. We'll start with their first round pick last year, or their second round pick last year, Ariante Ursary. Wasn't the best rookie year, but for the most part, I think he was a very average to below average starting tackle, which is honestly not that bad for a second round rookie tackle. He got better as the year went on, and hopefully you can continue to see that improvement from Ariante Ursary. Not a bad run blocker, not a bad pass blocker. He kind of can do a lot of different things at tackle. And for a team that has desperately needed help at tackle, I think you can look at Ursary and be like, there's a lot to like there with what we saw. And hopefully, as I said, you can see continued growth from him going forward, especially I think just having better surrounding casts around him will also help his improvement. And that starts with bringing in Wyatt Teller from, I believe it was Cleveland. Wyatt Teller, very quality guard. He can pass block, he can run block. Overall, he's definitely an upgrade over what they've had, since the last 2, 3 years. Not a bad starter at all. Very capable starting left guard, which I think can help Ariante Ursary's development, as we mentioned. We'll go to the right tackle, quickly talk about Braden Smith, their other veteran free agent pickup, switching interdivision, right? He's played his whole career with the Colts. Now he goes to Houston. In 13 games last year was pretty solid for the Colts as he always is when he actually can stay healthy. That's the big thing with Braden Smith. He's only played over 13 games once since 2020, and that was last year. Only allowed one sack last year, though. Is 30 years old, so will we see regression from Braden Smith? Who knows? But regardless, even if you see a little bit of regression, even if he misses a game or two, he's still a big improvement at right tackle for this Texans team. And I like the veteran presence that he has because you have Keelan Rutledge, who we'll talk about at their first round pick. And you also got Ariante Ursary, who was drafted just last year. So bringing in some quality veterans in Wyatt Teller and Braden Smith, I think will be super helpful for this team. Keelan Rutledge, their first round pick out of Georgia Tech, super athletic for a guard, ideal size and length. He finishes plays super well, very experienced throughout college as well. I think he can be a good run blocker with that athleticism that he has. He can get to that second level super quickly, and that's obviously what you need at that as a run blocker. I think he's going to significantly help guys like Montgomery and Woody Marks. He can pass block a little bit as well, maybe not, his strength, but he definitely can pass block. And I think he can develop into a better pass blocker throughout his career because he doesn't have to worry about that development in the run game. So I really like the Keelan Rutledge pick. And I think despite being a rookie, he can make a very quick impact on this Texans O line. And then probably the worst part of this Texans offensive line is Ed Ingram. their right guard. He had a promising first year with Houston in the fourth year of his career. Was pretty solid to good as a run blocker. Definitely does have work to do as a pass blocker, but I think he can improve. I think he showed you enough last year that showed he can make steps up as a pass blocker on top of potentially being an even better run blocker. And as I think a weak link, right? I know he's a rookie, Keelan Rutledge, but I think Keelan Rutledge can be better than Ed Ingram right away. And I think as a weak link, Ed Ingram or even Keelan Rutledge are not bad weak links at all on your offensive line. And this offensive line went from not great to, I think, a very solid unit that can continue to get better with guys like Keelan Rutledge and Ariante Ursary and even Ed Ingram continuing to develop. So this Houston offense wasn't the best last year. They were about middle of the league, maybe slightly below middle of the league. But I think another year of Nick Caley as the OC, I think, yes, a banged up receiver room with guys like Tank Dell and Jaden Higgins, but also a fully healthy, hopefully fully healthy Nico Collins, an improved run game with David Montgomery, an improved offensive line, I think. And obviously, the main question, a hopeful, better performing CJ Stroud, as well as fully healthy CJ Stroud. I think this offense could potentially push much higher than that middle of the league, slightly below middle of the league they were last year, maybe be a middle of the league to slightly above middle of the league offense this season. Now, and going on to the changes that this Texans team made on defense. Now, the Texans defense is one of the best in the league, so not a lot of changes need to be made, and not a lot of starting players actually got added and lost on this Texans defense, but there were some somewhat notable changes made to the defense. So if we'll start off with the D line. They move on from Tim Settle. Only played 12 games last year, but did start every game he played. It was actually pretty good for them last year, so that's going to be a tough loss. But they bring in two players that I think can fill the Tim Settle void with their second round pick, Caden McDonald, and with their free agent pickup of Logan Hall. I like the Caden McDonald pickup as one of the better D linemen in the draft and potentially the best run defending D lineman in the entire draft. And then Logan Hall is just a quality backup D lineman. So I think those two players combined can make up for the loss of Tim Settle. So I do think that's an upgrade because I really like Caden McDonald. I think surrounded by the D line that he is, I think he can actually have a very good rookie season. So I did give them the plus symbol for upgrading on that interior of the D line. At edge, they move on from Derek Barnett and they reunite with Jadeveon Clowney. Derek Barnett, I mean, he's a fine player, right? He had 5 sacks, didn't really get a lot of pressure last year for Houston. Not a bad edge rusher as a whole. And they bring in Jadeveon Clowney, who honestly wasn't that bad for the Cowboys last year at his older age. It's a cool story, but I also think he might be a slight upgrade over Derek Barnett. They're both backups, right? Because they have the best edge rush duo in the league with Will Anderson and Daniel Hunter. So I do have that as a neutral change. Then at linebacker, they bring in EJ Speed. They bring in Woody Woodis. Now, unfortunately, EJ Speed is going to be out the entire year with a torn quad. But I do think going forward, that's a decent pickup as their third linebacker. And then Woody Wood is as the fourth round pick out of Clemson, I think has some potential low or high ceiling, quick starter impact type of, outlook here for his rookie season. I didn't put it as an upgrade symbol because he is a fourth round pick and they do have two linebackers already. And because EJ Speed's not going to play it all this year. But I didn't mind the draft pick of Woody Wood is, and I didn't mind the signing of EJ Speed going forward. Just this season, I don't know how much we'll see from those two, so it is neutral. Then at safety, they move on from Jimmy Ward, who actually didn't play it all last year. The only reason I put Jimmy Ward on here is because let me find it. The only reason I put Jimmy Ward on here is because when he was playing with Houston, in the 2 years he played with Houston in 2023 and 2024, he was healthy for 10 games each season. He started every game he was healthy. So he was clearly a decent piece for this team when he was actually on the field. He just never really was on the field. Not too big of an impact. They didn't have him last year. And then Reed Blankenship, who they bring in from Philly, wasn't the best year last year for Reed Blankenship, but he's played good football before, just the year before. And because Jimmy Ward didn't play at all last year, I do have that as an upgrade at safety. But as I said, this Texans defense didn't really need much change at all. They could have honestly just ran it back with the same defense, and they would still be expected to be potentially the best defense in the league last year. But I do think, despite that, they still managed to get better at defense. Now to talk about this Texans defense. We'll start off with the D line. We'll start off with the interior of the D line. Before we get to the two superstars, we'll start off with the more question marks of this defense, and that's the interior. of this D line. They first got Sheldon Rankins, very nice player for them last year, right? He took a year in Cincinnati before coming back. So he played for Houston, left to Cincinnati, then came back to Houston last year. Now he's year two in this second stint with the Texans. He played every game with them, and that was the first time he's done that in a while. Had 3 sacks, over 30 tackles, and overall is just a very solid pass rushing D lineman, a nice veteran presence as well. Tommy Tagai, I definitely butchered that. Fourth year last year, played most games of his career, which is 15, similar to, I guess, Sheldon Rankins, and also was a very solid player, was pretty solid in the run, not a bad pass rusher as well, and a nice, still younger ish player on this Texans D line. But I honestly think potentially, maybe not Sheldon Rankins. Sheldon Rankins might be your best option, your most consistent, maybe most reliable option right away on this interior of the D line. But honestly, I like Caden McDonald and Logan Hall potentially better than at least Tommy Togai. Caden McDonald, second round pick, potentially the best run defending D lineman, interior D lineman of the entire draft. And I think that fits perfect with this Texans team, especially going forward. When you have the elite pass rushers that you do in Will Anderson, in Daniil Hunter, honestly, just elite edge rushers. With those two having an elite run defender, a guy with elite run defending potential, which I think Caden McDonald has, I think it's just a match made in heaven. He was an All American at Ohio State, had a super high tackle rate for an interior D lineman, not much of a pass rusher at all, but as I said, that's not needed because you have Will Anderson and you have Daniil Hunter. You can honestly put anybody on the entire on that interior of the D line and just rush those two off the edge, and you're going to get pressure anyway. So it's not the biggest of deals that Caden McDonald's really not much of a pass rusher at all because of how good he is as a run defender, and he won't get double teamed basically at all. You're telling me that if you have Will Anderson, Caden McDonald, and Daniil Hunter on the field, you're going to double team Caden McDonald? No, you're going to leave him one on one. So maybe that, even though he's not as much of a pass rusher, those endless amounts of one on one opportunities that he's going to have can maybe make him put up better numbers than he actually is as a pass rusher because he got double teamed a lot at Ohio State. That's just not going to happen here in the NFL. And then Logan Hall, who, as I said, is just a quality backup D lineman. He can rush the passer, he can defend the run, both at solid levels. He had 5.5 sacks the year before, and is on a stacked D line. I think Hall is more than capable as a backup D lineman, potentially a guy that can start here and there as well. And then you go to the edge rush room, which we know how good the two guys are at the edge, right? Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter. Not much has to be said. Will Anderson, one of those true generational talents in the league. He's one of the more valuable players in all of football. I saw all this stuff going around of like, who would you draft to start your team? And everyone wants to go to quarterbacks, right? Which understandable, it's the most valuable position in all of sports. But Will Anderson is right up there with people you are drafting first, at least who I'm drafting first to start my team because of how impactful and valuable the edge rush position is and how good Will Anderson is at such a young age. He's only about to be 25 years old. He had 12 sacks last year, made all pro, first team, second in DPOY, also a very good run defender. And he can honestly just take over games as part of one of the league's best defenses and one of the league's best players. Will Anderson is just really, really good. And it's crazy that Will Anderson is as good as he is, and Daniil Hunter is still on this team. Like the fact that Daniil Hunter is your team's second best edge rusher is ridiculous. Another dominant year for Will Anderson as the best, second best edge rusher in all of football. Had 15 sacks, gets after the quarterback extremely well, gets insane amount of pressure, and just a super consistent elite edge rusher. Not much needs to be said about Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson. We know how good they are. You can just run four man. You don't have to send blitzers. You don't have to send extra rushers because you know these two will get after the quarterback almost instantly. It feels like every single time. And then you have Jadeveon Clowney as your backup. Fun story, bringing Jadeveon Clowney back to Houston. He leaves Houston, bounces around the league, goes to the Panthers, the Cowboys, the Browns, I'm pretty sure. And now he finds his way back to Houston. And honestly, wasn't that bad last year for Dallas. Had in just 13 games, he had 8.5 sacks with Dallas. Got a decent amount of pressure despite being 33 years old. I think that's a very, very good backup on a very, very good D line, right? You don't need the best backup talent in the world when you have Will Anderson, when you have Daniil Hunter, but Jadeveon Clowney is more than capable of being a very good backup. And even though he's super old, you don't have to ask a lot from him, right? So if you want to give Will Anderson a breather, if you want to give Daniil Hunter a breather, you can throw Jadeveon Clowney out there and he can make some plays as a bench player, right? You don't have to rely on him being a consistent three down guy at his age because you have those two already. And then Dominic Orange, who they bring in from Chicago, he's your other backup. I mean, he's not really the best player right now, and maybe okay depth at best, but you don't need it because you have your two and you have your veteran guy there with Clowney off the bench. Overall, it's one of the best D lines in football, and it will once again be one of the best D lines in the entire NFL. Even if Will Anderson misses 3 games, even if Daniil Hunter misses 3 games, I think one of those two between Anderson and Hunter and Clowney can more than hold down this D line and still maintain it one of the best D lines in the league for that 3 game stretch that maybe one of those two misses. Hopefully not though. Hopefully we get 17 games out of these two because there's not much more entertaining D line, the edge rush duos than Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter. Now we can probably talk about the weakness of this Texans team. That's the linebacker room. It's really not the entire linebacker room because Azeez Al-Shaair is pretty good, right? He missed some time last year because of a suspension, I believe, but played 16 games, or he missed some time in 2024 because of suspension, but then he came back most recent season, played 16 games, probably had the best year of his career, honestly. It was the best in coverage. He's not the best in coverage at all in general, and it's still not a strength of his, but probably did have his best year in coverage. Maybe not had the amount of tackles when it comes to run defense as he had before, but overall was a better run defender than any other year of his career due to just being a better, more consistent tackler. Is just another piece of this elite Texans defense. Yes, he's almost 30 years old, but Azeez Al-Shaair is still one of the better linebackers. Maybe not like top 10, but he's for sure a top 20 linebacker in the league and just a very consistent one at that. Then you have Henry To'o. Played every game last year for the first time in his career, entering the fourth year going into this season. Not the best in coverage, similar to Azeez Al-Shaair, but also can get after the quarterback as a blitz threat. He can defend the run as well. And he has been getting slightly better as a run defender every year of his career. Still has been getting, marginally better in coverage every year. Still not a great cover player, but is only 25 years old, so maybe he can continue to develop as a cover player. But him and Al-Shaair being your linebacker duo is a very good linebacker duo, especially in run defense. Not the best in coverage, but again, as a run defender, those two are very quality players. And it's okay that you're not the best in coverage because quarterbacks normally have 2 seconds to throw the ball anyway because how good this D line is, and they also have a very good secondary. There's some interesting pieces on the depth of the depth of this Texans linebacker core. We'll start off with Jake Hansen, who don't exactly know when he's going to play because he's been banged up off season. Never had the biggest role in Houston through the first 4 years. Not the best in coverage, common trend, but also not a bad run defender as well. Could be asked a lot more this year because of the EJ Speed injury. They basically lost a linebacker and also didn't get one back. They didn't lose a linebacker, but they picked up EJ Speed, but they don't get to use him. So Jake Hansen might be asked a little bit more because it says here that they have a starting Sam linebacker in their projected depth chart. And if it can't be EJ Speed, it's got to be someone else. You also have Jamal Hill, who also had a smaller role like Hansen, an even smaller role than a Jake Hansen his first 2 years. Overall, not the best player in the first 2 years that he's played. Still young, similar to Jake Hansen. And you got Wade Wooders. I might have called him Wesley Wooders earlier. It's Wade Wooders. I didn't mind the Wade Wooders pick, just him coming out of the draft. Not the most athletic player at all, but he has potential to maybe be a solid coverage linebacker. Definitely does need to get stronger, but was very productive at Clemson and just in college. He's got good size, he's got good length. He can rush the quarterback a little, and he can even defend the run somewhat well too. So I like the Wesley Wooders pick, and I don't mind him as someone that could potentially be your third best linebacker. They also have Aiden Fisher, who they took out of Indiana in, I believe, the seventh round. Also, not a bad seventh round pick. He won a national championship that's going to get you a lot of players drafted. He can also defend the run. He's got good instincts. Not the best cover player, not the best open field tackler, or maybe even not the most athletic. But again, he's got the instincts, he's got the leadership. I think people have said that he can be an extension of your defensive coordinator with the leadership that he has. Maybe he'll develop a little in coverage, maybe he'll develop a little in tackling. But as a seventh round pick, don't hate it at all with a team that potentially needs that next guy. They have Aziz Al Shair, who is 30, right? You have Toto, who's giving you some hope as a linebacker, but maybe not fully where you want him to be. And outside of those two, it's a lot of wait and see. So taking a shot on a seventh rounder like Aiden Fisher, don't hate it at all. But yeah, definitely the weak point of this Texans defense. And now we can go to a strength of this Texans defense, which is their secondary. Potentially one of the best, if not the best, secondaries in all of football. We'll start off with Derek Stingley, who I think is easily, and most people think easily, a top three corner. It's normally PS2 at one, and then him or Gonzalez at two or three. Wherever you want to put Stingley is where you want to put Stingley. But we all know that Stingley is elite and he's been one of the best corners in the league since he's entered the league. Back to back 17 game seasons as well. He was slightly banged up his first two seasons, but he's been fully healthy the last two seasons. All pro first team the last 2 years. Not the best run defender, but when it comes to coverage, definitely one of the best in the league, no doubt. Right? He might have had the best season of his career last year. There's not much that needs to be said with Derek Stingley. And then you go to Kamari Lassiter, their other corner, who is one of the better corner twos in the entire league. He had a good rookie year. It wasn't like spectacular, Kamari Lassiter's rookie year, but he followed that up with an even better year two. Made Pro Bowl, was great in run defense, great in coverage, added 4 interceptions on top of the 3 that he had his rookie season. Was great just overall, right? And I think he'll be even better in year three. He made a jump from year one to year two, and he should be better, even better, making that jump from year two to year three. And then you have your nickel, Jalen Petrie, who's never talk about health, never really been fully healthy since his rookie season, as he seems to miss a few games every year. But when he's on the field, he makes an impact as that nickel safety hybrid. Was one of the best players in coverage last year. He can get after the quarterback, only 27 years old, great tackler as well. He had that big hit stick against Rashee Rice in that game against the Chiefs. I love Jalen Petrie, and him, Lassiter, and Stingley is probably the best three nickel or the best 3-man corner trio in all of football. Now, it gets a little worrying when you look at the depth of this Texans secondary. You really need a healthy Jalen Petrie. You really need a healthy Kamari Lassiter and a healthy Stingley because the depth is not great. You have Trayman Smith, who's a journeyman veteran in his second year with the Texans, ninth overall. He's never really found a prominent role in the NFL. Not the best cover guy when he does play. He's okay in run defense, but definitely not someone you want to have to rely on to play a lot of games for you. Jalen Smith, their other outside corner on the bench, only played 4 games as a rookie, former third rounder out of USC. He was a nice 3-year starter with some outside inside flexibility. And while he's not the best athlete, he can definitely defend the run somewhat well, even if he's not the best cover guy. And they got Elijah Huzzy, your current backup nickel, also only played 2 games his rookie season, undrafted out of UNC, I believe. 6-year senior, a nice compact build with a lot of play strength, has some athleticism in certain areas, also has experience being a 6-year senior out of college, and he can be decent nickel depth at best, but not someone you want to have to rely on to play a lot of games for you. So while you have your 3 studs at corner, you definitely don't have the best depth there. But we'll go back to talking about really good players, and we'll go to the safeties of this Texans team, which probably have one of the better safety duos in the league if you can get 2024 Reed Blankenship. We'll start off with Reed Blankenship, I guess, while we're talking about him. Free agent pickup, bringing him over from Philly, and it wasn't the best season last year for Reed Blankenship. But he had his really good 2024 year, right? So there's still that Reed Blankenship in there. And I think even being behind the best edge rush duo in all of football, and Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, it makes any corner and safety and secondary players and linebacker, it makes everyone's job easier when you have those two. So yes, he had a really good D line in Philly, but he also gets to go to another really good D line here in Houston. It was underwhelming last season for Reed Blankenship, but it was also underwhelming for that entire Eagles team for the most part, mainly the offense, but it was underwhelming for Reed Blankenship. If you can get 2024 Reed Blankenship, this can be one of the better safety duos in the league, and that's because Caleb, excuse me, that is because Kalen Bullock is that good. Another member of this elite Texans secondary. In just 2 years, he's already established himself as a top 20 safety, maybe top 10 safety, especially with his run defense being one of the better run defenders at the safety position. Coverage wasn't as good last year as it was his rookie season, but he's shown to be a good cover safety just in his rookie season, just last year. He's only 23 years old. I love Kalen Bullock. Him, Petrie, Lassiter, and Stingley is just an amazing four-man secondary that are all still super young that can beat this secondary can be together for potentially a decade. And if you can get 2024 Reed Blankenship, that's the best secondary in football, in my opinion, especially if those other guys take even more jumps in their play. But even if they don't, and you combine their versions last year with 2024 Reed Blankenship, that's still the best secondary in the league with potential to be even better if you get jumps from all those other guys. It was one of the best defenses of the season last year. It's basically the reason that made the playoffs. It's basically the reason they won 12 games after starting 0-3. It's because how freaking good this Texans defense is. And I expect no more from them going into this season under D'Amico Ryans and even under Matt Burke, who, as I mentioned, has been very key to D'Amico Ryan's success early on as a coach and and helping him get to the coach he is now, which is one of the best coaches in the league, coaching one of the best defenses in the league. Now, taking a quick look at this Texans special team, they bring in a new punter. They bring in Kai Kroger, who played his rookie season last year with the Saints. Wasn't the best rookie year for Mr. Kroger, but there's still potential there as a second-year punter. Then you got Kayami Fairbairn, one of the better kickers in the league, made and attempted the most field goals of any kicker last year. Went 44 for 48, making over 90% of his kicks. He was 9 for 13 from 50 plus. We all know how good Kayami Fairbairn is and has been for this Texans team. No real questions there. They have Jalen Noel, your punt and kick returner right now. Not a bad returner at all by any means his first season. And it's going to be one of the better special teams, in my opinion, just simply because of how good of a kicker Kayami Fairbairn is. So that's the special teams. Not too much talk about the Texans special teams, but it should be a decent unit overall. This Texans schedule, I have their floor at 9-8, their ceiling at 12-5, finishing with a final record of 11-6. It's a tough schedule, right? You have the Jags, who you play twice a year, who's never easy. Even the Colts, who they play twice a year as well, being in the AFC South, is also not an easy matchup. And the Texans didn't have to play the Colts at their full strength the two times they played them. You also play the Bills, who obviously aren't going to be easy. Yes, they beat them last year, but the Bills are obviously a really good team. You play the Chargers, you play the Ravens, you play the Packers, the Eagles. They got some tough opponents, but they also got some easy opponents, right? Play the Titans twice a year. The Giants is a very winnable game. You play the Browns. The Commanders is a somewhat winnable game. So I do have the Texans finishing at 11-6. They went 12-5 last year, and they won 10-7 the 2 years before that in the CJ Stroud, D'Amico Ryans era, whatever you want to call it. So they're going to more than likely win 10 plus games. And that's honestly because of the defense. The offense struggled last year. The offense was inconsistent last year, and this team managed to win 12 of their last 14 games because of how good this defense is. And if the offense could be more consistent, there's no reason they can't win double digit again. I do have the floor at 9-8, simply because we don't know how the O line's going to look. It's a tough schedule. They won 10 games 2 years before, and they won 12 when they honestly shouldn't have won 12. They just played so well towards the end of the season. So I don't think it's crazy to assume they win 9 games, but I also don't think it's crazy to assume they go 12 wins again, maybe even get 13 if you get a much better offense. But my final prediction overall, we're leaving it at 11-6 because I think they can beat the Titans twice, beat the Browns, beat the Giants. I think they can win 2 games combined against Jags and Colts. That puts them at 7. You can beat the Commanders, you can beat the Steelers, and you can beat another team on the schedule. Or no, if you take that, that's 8 wins that I just mentioned. That would be, I'm trying to remember here. That'd be Colts, Titans twice, Jags, Giants, Browns, Steelers, Commanders. That's 8 wins. And you're telling me they can't get 3 against Cincy, Dallas, another maybe again against the Colts or Jags. So I have that was a lot of words for not a lot of anything, but I'm going 11-6 for the Texans final record prediction. And that will do it for our Texans preview for the 2026-2027 season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.